Hey everybody, Cadillac Zach here, blues promoter in Southern California. I want to talk about a record that is very influential to me. You know, I've been meaning to do a little video series, and hopefully this will be the start of something. I've got a blues record collection of about 5,000 records, CDs, LPs, various things. And some of these, I would say at least a few hundred, are so incredibly influential to me and so important. Things that I've collected over the years, from somewhat mainstream blues, you know, from the 60s and 50s, all the way to some pretty obscure stuff that I think maybe only a few hundred people actually even really know about. This one is somewhere in the middle. This is this record here that I'm going to talk about today, Johnny Little John. Let me see it. Chicago Blues All-Stars. This was a record I discovered back in the 90s, the early 90s, around 94 or something. And I felt like I was late to the game when I found this, because the second I put it on, it completely blew my mind. When I lived in Chicago from 91 to 97, I was slowly becoming more and more completely obsessed with Chicago blues. When I moved there, I loved Otis Rush, Buddy Guy, and somewhat obscure artists in addition to that, but living there gave me such a massive education about all the kind of what I call the nook and cranny guys, the Byther Smiths, the Johnny Little John, who we're going to talk about today, the Buster Benton was probably the first guy that I saw live in a club in Chicago blues on Halsted. That completely blew my mind. When I moved to Chicago, I was coming from New England, from Massachusetts, specifically, where the bands there were very influenced by either Stevie Ray Vaughan or Ronnie Earl, which is not not atypical anywhere in the world. But the emphasis in Boston was never on the vocals. So when I was just barely old enough to go to the clubs. You know, I was like 21 years old at that time. But every time I ever went to a club, unless it was Luther Guitar Jr. Johnson or someone like that, it was always a white blues band, and the vocals were always an afterthought, or at the very least, you know, never the emphasis. There was some incredible talent there, but it was limited. And the minute I moved to Chicago, I started seeing some of the greatest, not only instrumentalists, but singers, which to me, I was always more into the blues singing thing, or at the very least equally to the guitar playing and other instrumentation. And when I got to Chicago, like I said, the first band I saw, this must have been like on a Wednesday or Thursday night at Blues on Halsted, which is on the north side of Chicago. Most of you know about this club. It's been around since 1979. Was Buster Benton, and he completely blew my mind. I mean, this guy was, he had about a 5-piece band. I think he had a rhythm guitar player, a bass player, drummer, and him, which is like the typical 90s Chicago setup. Some bands had keyboard players, but the two guitar thing was like a specifically Chicago thing at the time. And you know, you got bands like Magic Slim and Lil Ed, a lot of different bands that play in that format. Anyway, a lot of the West Side Chicago bands, you know, they would always have 2 guitar players, or sometimes only 1 guitar player and a horn player. But when I saw Buster Benton, he first of all, he was not sitting on the stage. This is in the early 90s, and he was actually, what I found out later, I think he was a diabetic, a really bad diabetic. So he actually was an amputee. I think he had one leg removed, and I saw him a couple of times over the years, maybe about 6 or 7 times over the years, and within a year or so, he'd become a double amputee, and they never sat him on the actual stage. He was always on the side of the stage on like a bar stool, kind of tucked away in the corner. So you would hear this incredible singing and this amazing guitar playing, kind of like in a very Albert King way, but a lot more minimalist. These like soaring kind of single note bends on the high E string and the B string. And I will do a separate video. I actually we should make this video about Buster Benton, but I don't have any of his music queued up right now. So, but I never knew who was singing. You know, I was always kind of in the back when I first got to Chicago. I just kind of stayed in the back of the club. And, but one thing for sure was the guitar playing was minimalist. So the guitar playing never completely blew my mind, but the vocals were always absolutely dead on, like a gospel tinged Bobby Bland kind of style, somewhere between B.B. King and Bobby Bland. I later discovered a singer out here in Los Angeles, where I'm talking to you from, that reminded me so much of him, and I wound up doing a bunch of different things with him, gigs or whatever, and recordings. His name was Curtis Jack Griffin. He reminded me a lot of Buster Benton. But anyway, so when I got to Chicago and I would see bands like this, not only was the lead headliner artist, you know, the guy on the marquee, was a great singer, but everybody in the band would take a turn, and they would do like harmonies. Magic Slim especially would have like 3- and 4-part vocal harmonies all the time. So I just remember how completely novel and exciting it was when Buster Benton would, you know, do sort of a round robin and let the bass player sing one, and then let the other guitar player sing one, and then let the drummer sing one, you know. And every time they were just as good as him, pretty much. I mean, he was like maybe a notch or two above them, but they could have been band leaders on their own. I mean, these guys were absolutely incredible. I wish I knew their names. I think even at the time I never knew their names, because at that time I wasn't, I never thought to even ask. But this record that I want to talk about today, by an artist named Johnny Littlejohn, when I was there in '91, I got there around December of '91. All of the great artists that performed in Chicago would perform really during the week. I mean, my favorite artists would play Sunday through Thursday. And then on the weekends, Friday and Saturday, it always seemed like most of the artists that would perform were much more well-known guys that would kind of, I hate to say it, but they were sort of pandering to the conventioneers that were in town. They were always pandering, you know, and playing a lot more, you know, Wilson Pickett kind of stuff, and Mustang Sally, and like kind of the what they call the set list from hell, blues top 40, which is not what I was into. I always have migrated to the more obscure stuff and the more kind of raw sounding blues. One name that I used to see all the time on the marquee as I would drive by, like on a Wednesday afternoon. I lived only a mile from Blues on Halsted. Was this name Johnny Littlejohn. And every time I saw that name, I thought, I don't know who that is, so I'm not going to bother going, which is probably one of the biggest mistakes I ever made the entire 5 years that I lived in Chicago. I would learn to regret that eventually. And I can't remember if I discovered this record after he died, or I'm sure if I had discovered it before he died, I would have then gone to see him. But He died, I think, of cancer, supposedly around 94. And so I must have discovered this record around 94, sometime after he was not playing anymore. And the way I discovered it is interesting, but first I'm going to play you a cut. This is called What in the World? I think this is a Jimmy Rogers tune, but you'll hear, the thing that I love about him is he's got the soaring, deep, Elmore James-y kind of vocals, and his guitar playing, he was known for two different styles. Slide playing, which he does like on probably half the tunes here on this record, and some straight picking. And he's playing, I don't know if he was playing a gold top, he's pictured with a gold top here, but I don't know if he's playing this guitar specifically. I know this picture was taken in 1968, and I believe by the producer of this record, Chris Strakowitz. This is Arhoolie Records is the label, and I know that picture was taken around that time, so I'm assuming he's playing a gold top. I don't know what kind of amp he's playing, but he's got this like really biting, distorted tone, which I love. So here we go, and let me explain, not to keep you in suspense, but when I first heard this very first tune, it set me on another path of collecting everything that this guy ever made. And the first, the way I discovered this record was kind of interesting. I was dating somebody for about 2 years at that time, and her mother lived in the suburbs of Illinois, in Niles, Illinois. So we would go there and visit her mom. Her mom would make these incredible meals for us. And at the time I was probably 23, 24. Right next to her mother's house was the Chicago Public Library, one branch of it, the Niles branch of it. And at the library, they used to have, CDs, cassettes that you could take out. And it being Chicago, they had like a huge blues collection. I think they probably had about 100 blues CDs and cassettes. They probably had more cassettes at the time than CDs. And I remember it was only on cassette was this record I pulled out of a bin, and it looked interesting. I loved the artwork on it. And I remember taking it, not thinking too much of it. It was like one of a pile of cassettes that we rented from the library. Maybe about whatever the maximum was that they would let you rent, like 8 or 10 of them. And it looked the best visually. So when we left the library and got in the car to drive to her mother's house, this is the first one that I put in the cassette player. And when the vocals kick in on this first song, my mind was completely blown, and everything had changed at that point. And I realized that these obscure artists are the ones that I really wanted to seek out and play like. And they became the most influential ones to me. The reason I'm doing this record first and talking about this one is because this one probably had the most impact on me as far as a discovery goes. Because again, it was the first time that I really heard an artist that I had never seen, whose name I was never familiar with before, and just took a wild shot in the dark at listening to. If I had seen this record in a record store, I might have passed it over, but so anyway, this is the first tune on the record. It's called What in the World Are You Gonna Do? We'll start from the beginning here.
When your best friend turned their back on you,
about this record is it's so loose and raggedy. I mean, the horns are, and the changes are kind of happening in a free-form style. I mean, everybody knows this is a 12-bar blues, but Johnny seems to hesitate in the vocal when he comes back in on the second time through so much, and just kind of lets it play out. It's sort of like, you know, like what John Lee Hooker does, but he's doing it with an entire band and a horn section. So the horn section kind of doesn't know, you know, exactly when they're supposed to come in. And it's, that type of thing is really endearing to me because it doesn't feel canned, and it feels immediate, and it feels genuine. You know, when something is too well rehearsed and has too much structure, you feel like it is a product and not so much someone's soul, you know, their raw, naked soul. So anyway, let's continue with this one here.
What you gonna do when your best friend turn their back on you?
That guitar tone and the minimalism.
You got a rubber steel, don't find what to do. Oh, it makes me feel so bad when my poor tunes cry.
This record, you know, this is a kind of a major independent label at the time. Arhoolie Records has released a ton of kind of like anthropological music, Mexican music, and Chris Strakowitz is like, you know, a super dedicated, he's still alive today, he's like probably 92, 93 years old. There's even a Netflix special on him called Ain't No Mouse Music that you gotta check out. He talks a little bit about blues, but, you know, I think it's Norteño music and other stuff that he's interested on a musicological level. But anyway, for a record to be released like this that really feels completely spontaneous and genuine and immediate is really impressive, because, you know, usually you have like kind of the approach that's epitomized most by like Alligator Records or something like that. And this is not a disparaging comment on Alligator, I love what they do, but where everything has been completely worked out down to the the last note, and there's never a mistake, you know. That's what I'm talking about. The Alligator Records kind of post 1980. The earlier stuff was similar to this. This was, I believe this is recorded in 68. And the other interesting thing about this record is that, pardon me if I'm rambling here, but yeah, November 14, 1968. The interesting thing about this record is that when Chris Strakowitz came to Chicago, or when he recorded Buddy Guy, I can't remember exactly what the story was, but he had some sort of contact with Buddy Guy when Buddy Guy came to Berkeley, California to perform. And he asked Buddy who he should record in Chicago. And Buddy said two names immediately. Earl Hooker, who was somewhat well-known, you know, for being a sideman on a lot of records like with Junior Wells and stuff, and Johnny Littlejohn. Those were the two. So Chris Strakowitz immediately went to Chicago, looked them up, and the rest is history. So he did a couple of records on Earl Hooker, and this is the only one he ever did on Johnny Littlejohn, for whatever reason. Anyway, let's go with another tune here. I love his version of Kiddio. This is a Brook Benton tune that he completely reinvents and makes his own, and makes it like a barroom style rough and tumble thing. So let's check this out here.
across the road. I can't stand.
What I love, again, not to overemphasize this, is that, you know, in the beginning of this tune, some horn player is like, hits the wrong note, big time. It's like not subtle. But they don't stop it, you know, and do it again. Maybe they did multiple takes and this was the one that they kept, you know. But that's what I love about it, is that the imperfection there, and it's not hugely glaring, but you're making a statement in a way when you keep these imperfections in there, and you're saying that this is tavern music, you know, this is like real life. This is not a product. This isn't Cheese Whiz. This is actual, a living, breathing thing that is vulnerable and could fall apart at any minute. That's the subtext. Not to over-intellectualize it, but that's what I get out of it, you know. And when I heard stuff like that from this record specifically, I thought, that's exactly what I want to do. I don't ever want to be super polished. If I was playing a different kind of music, yeah, maybe. But in blues, being super polished, or, you know, recording to a click track or something like that, to me is the complete antithesis of blues. There's so many players I also like that play with, you know, guitar pedals and things like that. But for me, to just have that raw sound of a guitar, of wood and string going into a tube amplifier, or even a solid state amplifier, with no compression and nothing coming between the sound of the natural sound of the guitar into the amp. To me, that is the thing that always sounds the most human, you know. And I think the blues is about the human quality. When you bend a string on a guitar, you're trying to mimic a human voice, you know. Like, you know, your vibrato is a human, it's an extension of the human voice. I mean, nobody epitomized that more than like an Elmore James or a B.B. King or Albert King. Those were the greats. And why? Because they played a pure sound. So, not to overemphasize that, I'll do an entire video on something like that later. Let's do another one here. He's doing a J.B. Lenore tune on this one. How Much More Long? Let's see here. This will be the last one we do. I'm not sure why I played that track specifically. There's 12 great tracks here, and you know, I could just sit here and play them all. Let's see, Dream. Here he's doing his Elmore James kind of slide thing. Got to play some slide to represent what he does in that realm. Okay, so that's definitely, I mean, a complete Elmore James mold, but he has enough of his own personality and spin on it, you know, in the licks and his tone and the whole thing, and his vocals. You know, we know who his hero is, but he's definitely his own man. I mean, we could probably have 50 Elmore James influenced artists, and they would all have a little bit of their own spin on it. But he's got his formula really works for me, where he's got truly, you know, 30, 40, 50% of his own sound. He's not a complete Elmore James clone. I'm trying to think of what else. This is another good one. Been Around the World. This is the Jimmy Rogers tune I was thinking of. He obviously loves Jimmy Rogers.
I've been around the world. I've covered lots of space. I haven't found the one ever take your place. That ain't it. Baby, I need you love. Now they need
Guitar player, the rhythm guitar player, oh, actually the bass player on this is Alvin Nichols, also known as BB Jr., BB King Jr. Forgetting exactly what he went by, but he was alive in Chicago. That's another guy that I missed seeing. There were so many artists that I did see in my short 5 years there. I crammed 30 years worth of music into 5 years. I was out literally every single night in a different club, whether it was on the south side, west side, or north side. And I never got to see Alvin Nichols, BB Jr., and that is a major, major regret. I mean, I couldn't have seen everybody. I mean, literally at that time in the 90s, Chicago had hundreds, this is no exaggeration, of great black blues artists. Lots of different ethnicities. Everybody, you know, in Chicago, like there was like a huge blues culture there. People would move there for a short amount of time from Europe. I saw so many people sitting in that were in town, like Europeans, that were obsessed with Chicago blues in the 90s. They would sit in with all these great bands. And, but there were, you know, you would open up the, on Thursdays, The Reader in Chicago, which was like the LA Weekly is out in Southern California. And there would be listings of, I'm not kidding you, like 80 clubs. Half of them, or 3/4 of them, were on the south side or the west side of Chicago. And you knew that those were going to be some very spontaneous sounding artists. Some really soulful, gritty, urban, heavy black blues. And I would go down there as much as I possibly could. But my 5 years there were a major, major learning curve. I don't know if it would have taken me 30 years to learn what I learned in 5 years if I didn't live in Chicago. Anyway, I'm going to leave you with one tune here. Let's see, what should we do here? Let's do his version of Catfish. Catfish Blues by Robert Petway. And I just want to thank you for watching this. If you made it all the way to this one, please leave a comment wherever this is. If it's going to be on Instagram or YouTube, leave a comment below and let me know if I should do another one of these videos, or if this was it, if I failed on this one. Thanks again. And if you're ever in the Southern California area, you want to come to a show, I fly in the greatest blues artists from Texas, Mississippi, Chicago, all over the world. We do shows every Friday in Camarillo, Saturday in the Pasadena or Arcadia area, Sunday in Long Beach at Mulaney's Grill, and Monday at the Maui Sugar Mill Saloon in Tarzana. Love you guys. Thank you. Catfish Blues.